Hi, this is Brent Feldman, and we are back with another episode of Mix and Matchbox. Today, I am joined by David Carlson, the Vice President of Sales for MANTL. Hey, David, how are you doing?
Hey, really good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for being on the podcast. Really looking forward to actually kicking off our series of financial related sort of podcasts here, and definitely looking forward to some of your answers to the questions coming up. So I'll start pretty straightforward. You started your career at Edward Jones as a financial advisor. You were at Haberfeld, an agency and consultancy for financial institutions, and now you're at MANTL. So after seeing so many sides of the financial institutions, of different financial institutions and stuff, what are some of the biggest changes you've seen within the industry?
Yeah, no, I like that question. And obviously, as you might imagine, it's been almost 25 years. There's been a lot of changes that have happened. It's funny how a lot of them have happened slowly, and I think some of them have happened kind of quickly. It reminds me of a funny story. One of my CEOs once was in a meeting, and he asked a similar question. And there was like a 90-year-old bank chairman who was in the room, and he raised his hand. And he said, the biggest change in technology in the last 50 years has been air conditioning, which I thought was a pretty good answer to the question. I would say that if I had to work in a bank during the summer months in the South, that having air conditioning would have been the most important revolution in banking to me as well. So I thought that story has always stuck with me. But on that line, like technology to me has been the biggest change. And that's why I changed my career trajectory from like consulting and doing a lot of branch-based things into the technology side of what banks and credit unions needed to grow, because so much of the demand has moved to that side. And so when you think about just the massive shift in consumer expectations, right? If I was a community regional bank or credit union, like that would be the thing I would be spending the majority of my time thinking about, is like, how far has the expectation of what the consumer thinks good looks like changed in just the last 5 years? And the answer is it's moved significantly. And unfortunately, like a lot of the legacy technology providers that most folks have been reliant upon are just not keeping up. And that's where folks like MANTL and others have really been able to come in and kind of help with this particular challenge.
That's really cool. So, like, kind of moving forward from just the consultative side, being able to impart tangible change and stuff in some of these organizations, yeah, it has to feel good. It has to be fun.
It does. Yeah. And just constantly focusing on outcomes is like what I've always built as part of like my personal brand as I've worked with these folks over the years. And, MANTL does that particularly well. And I look forward to kind of the rest of today's conversation, because I think that will come up a lot. Because at the end of the day, that's what folks need. They need true change, and not just to make change, but to actually see the outcomes that they need to see on the other side.
Absolutely. All right. Well, cool. Well, yeah, that leads very well right into the next question about, sort of what MANTL does. I guess so. MANTL helps streamline the account origination process for banks and credit unions. I'm sure there are many problems to solve, but why was that one seemingly the most urgent?
Yeah. I think there's, again, a lot of different ways to go here, but the number one reason it's urgent is because it just misses the mark so significantly from where the market is really at on this today. So we've got this interesting chart that Alkami actually did some research on with Cornerstone, and it shows like where did the checking accounts happen year over year for the last 5 years. And what you find is like less than 5% of checking accounts are happening in community banks, less than 5% of checking accounts are happening in credit unions. And it's now 45% of checking account openings are happening at digital banks, in like neo banks and fintech banks, right? And so like, dude, the market totally moved on you and you didn't keep up. And so what we saw is like, this is a really solvable problem. We think about these three key tenets when it comes to opening accounts. You have to have an amazing user experience while staying in compliance, and you have to keep the fraud out of the system. And so if you're going to build MANTL, like those were the three problems that you had to solve. And so you had to figure out, could we give a better user experience, which means fast, simple, easy, intuitive with clean, like UX, right, and UI. But could we do that and stay in compliance? And what that required is like bringing in new partners into the space that people weren't using, right? Bringing in innovative third-party data sources that people weren't resourcing. And the sad part is this is still a significantly unsolved problem in this particular space today. We're still really behind when it comes to using those tools. So that was what, like, when we frame this up, it's like, these are the problems we need to solve. And then when we built what we built, like, we started figuring out like, oh yeah, this is as good as we thought it could be from an outcomes perspective.
That's awesome. That's really fun. Yeah, and definitely, I'm sure as you see kind of like these legacy systems that you're maybe like jumping on top of, like there's UX problems to fix. There's but as you mentioned, it's compliance and keeping fraud out. It still has some underpinnings of the banking system, tenants that you have to subscribe to. You have to make sure you're solving the whole thing completely. Well, I guess I think that this is definitely MANTL can be solving that part of like help getting a good, clean account origination process in order. But good marketing really has to go hand in hand with like good user experience. And in order to basically get that sort of streamlined experience, getting good straightforward account origination in place, like where do you see most marketing processes really falter or fail?
Yeah. And I think, again, there could be lots of good answers here, but the place I would start is your digital front door. So I would kind of set the stage and have you like think about it this way. If somebody's considering a new bank, a new credit union, like a new financial institution that they're going to become part of, like when they're thinking about like going big or going small, like one of the concerns they're going to have with using a smaller institution is that your technology is not going to be as good. And if they come to you knocking on your digital front door and it looks like you built your website in the 80s, like you've completely validated every concern that they had, and they're just going to leave. Mm-hmm. Right. And so you really need to think about like, what does my digital front door look like? And when somebody shows up at my digital front door, are they impress? Mm-hmm. Right. Or does it look like a front door of a dilapidated house and people are like, I'm not going in that house. Like that looks like not the place that I would like to be. And so building from that as the main construct is great. Now I've got an amazing digital front door and I look like I'm modern and I look like somebody who actually likes technology, would choose to do business with me. Then the second thing you got to ask in that marketing journey is, am I making it simple to make that next step? Mm-hmm. So if somebody came in to open an account, like how easy is it to navigate from your front welcome page to opening an account? Like it should be one click away.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. And then the other thing is like, don't make people re-decision on decisions that they've already made, right? Community, smaller banks and credit unions tend to do a not great job of linking, or they're really limited by poor products that can't do this well. Right. So saying that differently, if I've come in and I've decided the checking account that I want to open and I click apply now, I should never have to make that decision again. Right. Like move on. They've already told you what they want to do. The next thing I should be doing is entering in whatever information you need, the least amount of information that you can possibly gather and stay in compliance and book that account to the core. That should be the remaining part of the process. So I see this a lot in like how all these things come together. And then the last point I would make is like, this should feel really organic inside of your digital banking app as well. Mm-hmm. So when I've seen experiences where you're logged into your digital banking app, they send you an ad to open a new account, and it's for a 5.5% money market account. Sweet. You click on it, you land on a site that asks you to do what? Choose which account you want to open. Mm-hmm. And like, this is not the way good marketing and good technology comes together, folks. Like this just really validates people's concerns of like, I'm not so sure that these folks are going to be, modern enough to be the type of institution that I want to deal with. So those are some examples I see quite frequently.
That is wonderful. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Just, don't make people decide twice. It's been enough for them to get to this point and make that decision. You want to make it as fluid and easy, as frictionless, kind of quote unquote as possible.
That's right.
That's cool. Well, as MANTL receives, I guess, the data and analytics off the digital processes that you're providing, how does this, sort of digital feedback inform changes that could be made to the in-branch experience as well? Because you're operating not only in the digital, but also in branch theoretically. So how does one inform the other or vice versa?
Yeah, and this is how MANTL became who we are. So 9 years ago, we started as an online only company because we knew that was a massive problem that needed to get fixed, right? Community regional banks, credit unions weren't doing this well. The fintech banks were, and we wanted to take that type of fintech experience and deliver it to the community and regional banks. And so we did that. We saw amazing outcomes. We got a whole bunch of clients that were really, really happy. But the question we got every single time is, why in the world can I open an account in 3 minutes online, but if I come into a branch, it's a 25-minute interrogation, right? Like, this can't be. It's the same rules. It's the same account opening. It's literally the same product. And that's where about 5 years ago, we made a full pivot, completely rebuilt our platform from the ground up to support full omni-channel account opening, including in branch. Because the reality is, like, the hard stuff happens in branch. And I'm going to drill down on this here in a second, right? But when people show up in a branch, it's usually due to the more complex things. So what we figured out really fast is you can't take this skin that you've made to do online account opening, like add in a field that says business owner, or like pretend like you can do. It just falls super flat when you go to market because it can't do anything hard. And if I'm a banker in branch and I'm using a platform to open accounts, like, I can't start opening an account and realize, well, that sucked, and then log into a new system and start over. Like, that's a terrible experience. And so where we've invested the majority of our R&D over the last 4 years is like deeply understanding what you need to be real in branch, which is so much more difficult than what it took to build the product in a digital space. And so we're taking all of that feedback all of the time to make sure we've got a great unified experience no matter where those customers or members want to be met.
Yeah, that's it. It makes sense though, because it's a problem of throughput. You're wanting to streamline these processes. You're wanting to make it easier, not only for the bank themselves, but for the customer. I mean, like, they don't want to deal with, like, either spending too much time on, legacy systems, processes, things that just don't need to be there. So the better you can make it with the experience, whether you're in branch or online, it just sounds like, it's a win-win for everybody. Well,
That's right.
Cool. Well, I guess at the end of the day, MANTL is theoretically it's a digital solution. It is a digital product. So in your professional opinion, as we see the rise of digital products, AI, agentic, and otherwise, is there a process or a problem that you still see the human component at being basically critical?
Yeah, and I think this is a great question because to me, this is where I think sometimes financial institutions get confused because they think they try to pigeonhole something as just digital or just in branch or just this. Like, none of that matters anymore, right? Like, when's the last time you needed some item and you looked it up on your phone, and then at 30 seconds later you were in your car because you needed it real time and you're driving to the store and they already had it for you and you picked it up and you took, like, everything is in sync all of the time. It's the world that we live in. So this distinction of like in branch or digital, or stop, right? The answer is you need a really great experience wherever your customers or your members need to be met. So the stat I just saw this week, 52% of customers visited a branch at least once last year. And if you dig into why, they did it to do the hard stuff, which I was kind of hitting on earlier, right? So they did it because they needed a loan and they thought it's going to be complex. I want an advisor, right? They did it because they needed to add beneficiaries, or it's a trust account, or it was, right, something that's more complex that actually requires a human being's touch. And like, we should celebrate this as bankers. Right? We are freeing up our people's time to stop being buried in operational crap and actually serve our customers and members, which is what we always wanted them to do. And so when we're really thinking about, like, how do these great digital systems come together, it is not here to replace human beings. It's to augment them so that they can do what human beings do particularly well. And so we teach this all of the time to potential customers, which is like, you have to start thinking differently about the way that you're approaching this, and like let digital do what digital can do really well, and free your team up to do what people do really well, and still have a 30-minute account opening experience, but only 5 of it is keying into the keyboard, and 25 of it is doing what you've always said you were going to be, which is like be a sales and service related organization. So that's part of what I think we're really trying to empower by making technology better and easier to use.
That's wonderful. I really appreciated how you answered that, because it kind of starts at like an old business tenet, which is just like meet your customer where they're at.
That's right.
Yeah. And being, sort of like, either confused or overwhelmed, or letting that sort of like nomenclature, kind of overwhelm the process of like, yeah, in branch, digital, anything like that. It's just, trying to do the best by your customer at the end of the day. So, right. Free up your time to be in front of them and take care of that relationship. So that's cool. Well, digital transformation is usually an inflection point where, organizations tend to kind of reflect on the tools that, either are or aren't working. Where should banks and credit unions start? Or to make some of those key considerations about what those sort of processes are.
Yeah, my number one piece of advice here is like, allow yourself to have a moment where you're like, if I didn't wake up this morning and wasn't already stuck with whatever it is, process, product, technology, whatever it is, right? And I was coming in with fresh eyes to solve this problem, is this the way I'd solve it?
Mm-hmm.
And it's unbelievable to me, like the number of times the answer to that is no, right? So people just feel really hamstrung either by bad technology, bad decisions from the past, like not having an open mind to how about like thinking about risk from maybe a slightly differentiated perspective, right? And so I think there's something to like the banks that are really doing well and the credit unions that are really growing, like they have the freedom to have those types of conversations. And then actually get some voices in the room that are actually living in the pain. It can be a bit frustrating when I'm in a room of executives and they kind of have this view of like, well, I don't really view most of this as that big of a problem. And I'm like, of course not. You don't have to actually deal with it. But then we get the actual users in the room and man, the conversation really changes. I just experienced this on site at a bank yesterday. Right. And they just, man, the list just never stopped of the painful things that they were having to do manually that they were hoping to be able to automate with better technology. So that's always my number one suggestion is, and then the other thing I'd say is we have preconceived notions of, well, our credit union would never change this. Right. Right. It's the golden calf principle, right? Like whatever you do, don't change that. And like you should challenge that. Because if there's a key component that can really be slowing you down, the best example of this in account opening is compliance and regulation, right? I find for the most part, like compliance folks are wonderful to work with, and we bring them in early to the majority of our conversations because we want to educate around thinking about risk from a different perspective. Where it's hard is when it feels top down and they feel like they're forced to make a change that they haven't been educated or had any like comfortability around why would this be a good thing for the bank to do. So don't assume like just because you've always done something one way, there isn't a different way you could approach it. Instead, let's think about like who are the key stakeholders that would have to say yes to this, and can we get them thinking about this differently?
Cool. That's really helpful, and I definitely appreciate the notion of basically challenge everything. I feel like that's really important. This is kind of a sidebar question to this digital transformation, but as you digital transformation, I think to some people can mean like, oh, we've got to, throw out everything, we've got to, in that giant upheaval, I think can maybe be the thing that stalls a lot of people in that process of like, oh gosh, we have to upend every single system that we have. Now, what are we going to do? But is there any advice that you might have on that digital transformation? I think you mentioned one thing, which was, like think about the thing that you could live without tomorrow, or the thing that is maybe causing you the most pain. I think that could be a good way. But do you have any other advice for people that are confronted with, we know we have to make a change, where do I start?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other, the big pull forward is like think outside of the core provider, right? And we love these core providers. We integrate with all of them. They have some really good products, and nobody wants to change that core. But man, it's like over 50% of financial institutions have partnered with a fintech now in some way. And so these APIs are just so much more available than they were before. There's so many providers like MANTL and Alkami that have done these integrations like hundreds of times on these cores. It's not like it was 10 years ago where you're like, oh gosh, I got to be the first, and then it's not going to work half the time. And like, this isn't where we're at. Like we're way down the journey. So I think opening the opportunity to bring in the best, like our industry has built a little bit of precedent around like okay is okay. And like I would challenge that a little bit, right? Like when you want to make change, like don't just settle for okay. Like, is there a better approach? And we've seen a lot of folks have good success with that.
That's great. Don't have to keep status quo. Well, cool. The market is full of institutions, sort of big and small. How vital is it for organizations to work on their digital execution in regard to their overall thought of how their customer experience really is? Like, is digital key to it, or is it just a supplement?
Yeah, man. I would imagine the vast majority of folks listening to this are like, oh, I mean, I don't know how you can't in today's society understand how critical this is, right? And so even if somebody's going to come into a branch, you want that great branch experience. The goal when they leave the branch for the bank or the credit union is for them to be signed up in your digital banking app before they leave, right? Because everybody knows they're going to do all of their transactions inside of that digital banking app, right? And that's why now that we're owned by Alkami, like we now have a really interesting additional part of our story, which is not only can we help make that account opening great, but where you're going to spend the rest of your life with your financial institution, like is also supported as part of that journey. So I think we all get this. Like this is where all of your customers and members are going to spend the vast majority of their time. And I think that's why we're seeing our spend continue to go up, people wanting to prioritize this and bring in the best solution instead of just an answer. And I think that's going to continue to go up.
Totally. I had to reflect on it just the other day of like, when was the last time I was in a branch for my business bank? Wow, it's been years. Yeah. And it's not that I haven't interacted with people from the bank or had conversations, but I mean, like, yeah, the digital products are what I'm using on a daily basis. So yeah, I appreciate that context. Well, cool. Well, with the rise of account growth, and you clued me in a little bit to this in a previous conversation we had, but in fintech and large banks, that's where there seems to be a big rise in account growth. What are the biggest assets on the side of smaller banks and credit unions, even as that happens? Like, and then also on the other side of that, what are the biggest threats?
Yeah. So, I mean, on the asset side, it has to be your people, your relationships, and like your connection to your local community. Right. Like, and that's where you do get this like interesting intersection between like invest in technology, make it easy for people to never come talk to you. Right. That feels a little bit counterintuitive to this principle, but it's not. Right. It really comes back to like, you should be very agnostic to the channel of which people choose to do business with you in. If they think good is opening their checking account while they watch the Pacers game tonight, right? Like meet them where they want to be met. That is great service for them. If they think it's coming into a branch, you should do that as well. And so I think your people are still the star, even if people are doing things in a self-service way, because you've allowed that to be enabled. And this is really where omni-channel comes in, right? Which is we have to be able to have the right channel for the right people at the right time. And so if I decided self-service is best for me, but for whatever reason I couldn't get through your application, and I do call up to talk to a human being, and it's not an omni-channel account opening, so it was bifurcated, and I can't see the application in the call center and actually fix the problem, super frustrating, right? we've absolutely missed the mark when it comes to, we're a community bank, we give great service. That is not great service, because the two options at that point are trying to figure out what the heck they see on their own device, which is terrible, right? Or starting over, which is not much better from a solutioning perspective. So I think you've got to figure out that from a people perspective. And then thinking about the business banker side, the majority of our business accounts opened in MANTL are relationship led. They start with a banker or credit union executive kicking off the conversation and handing it off. Again, it's just giving your businesses the ability to self-serve where they want to. So you go through and you get jammed and they need to give you some paperwork, like pass it back over to them, make it easy to load that document and then kick it back to the banker, right? And so this allows your continued relationship builders to be heavily involved in the accounts, which is important. The concerns we've talked a lot about already, which is just, technology that doesn't add up, lack of digital and marketing spend driving traffic and understanding like what buckets to play in and not to play in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then just generally lack of scale, right? So
Yeah.
it's just, we're just really it's just, man, you look at the number of employees that Chase has in their digital and infrastructure teams that are building these things, like they spend billions of dollars on this stuff,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's a reason they've gotten pretty good at it.
Yeah, that's helpful, and definitely on the threat side, I think you've touched on, you're right, a couple of those things already, but it is interesting where it does come down to, marketing spend and people playing in buckets, unfortunately, that, they're like, oh, well, it feels good when we have TV commercials on. You're like, okay, but where's that leading? And how can you get make sure that there's actually tangible growth out of the investments that you're making? But that's helpful. So as MANTL is embedded in the tech stack of a number of institutions, are there any new products and growth areas that you can kind of see MANTL moving into? And can you discuss any of them?
Yeah, there's a few that we've like publicly disclosed we definitely can spend a bit of time on. The first one we've been working on for a bit now is on the loan side. So as you might imagine, now that we've built all the infrastructure to connect to the core, we've got these great engagement layers in terms of opening up accounts. Like it's not that much of a stretch to build in the additional requirements that you would need to do for loans. So we see a lot of demand for this in the marketplace. They want a unified solution for both deposits and loans. So they can have one front door for their customers or members, not only for just deposits, but also for loans, being able to do combo applications, being able to cross-sell loans after accounts are open. There's so many good synergies to doing that. And then the second one is equally as interesting, is just continuing to add to our in-branch functioning from like a maintenance perspective. So today in MANTL, you can already do things like update signers, update owners, change beneficiaries. Like these are all kind of what we would view as maintenance functionality, but keep going down that journey of, man, can I change an address in here? Can I do like additional SIF level maintenance, as most folks would call it in the industry? Like it's really valuable to be able to have one platform to do all of that.
That is cool.
So yeah, when we look at that, like the ability to be able to do deposits, loan, maintenance. So particularly on the training side, I'm only having to train people to use one system. People are continuing to ask us to do that for them.
That's awesome. Yeah, smoothing out those processes, I think sounds like a great help. And I must say, just on the loan side, oh my gosh, having had my own experience as a business owner getting an SBA loan, the mystery about where we were at in the process, what actually totally was needed from a document standpoint. I would always throw out, I was like, wouldn't it be nice to have like a pizza tracker almost for like your loan of like just where are things at, and I feel like that sounds like those would be great additions to what can be very complicated, convoluted processes. So cool.
100%.
Awesome. Well, last question I got for you. Now that MANTL is a part of Alkami Technologies portfolio, what are some of the new capabilities or resources that can provide an even, sort of brighter future for the platform or related services?
Yeah, 100%. And what we're hearing and talking a lot about is this idea of anticipatory banking. right? Like the world has moved to customization and like being ahead instead of being behind. And so financial institutions sit on tons of data and insights about their customers through the transactions and things that are going on. And so when you look at like Alkami having the ability through a company that they acquired a few years ago called Segment, they call it also Alkami Data and Marketing, to be able to kind of mine and see those types of opportunities. Plus, you've got this great digital banking app that you have a captive audience of people who are logging into multiple times daily. And then you got this best in breed account opening conversion engine. Like, it doesn't take too much imagination to think like that can get really cool really fast.
Yeah.
And so how do we start getting ahead? How do we start seeing signals quicker? How do we start getting messages in front of our customers and members before they're leaving? Like, this is like, and this isn't like, you know, dream state, maybe this could happen in 5 years. Like, these are things that can happen today with kind of those combinations. So when you look at Alkami and like, why did they make the investment in MANTL? Like, that was the number one reason why, is they feel like this is the future. Right? The future is everything in the digital banking app, including real-time alerts to customers and members about what we're seeing happening in their financial life, hopefully even before they're kind of seeing it, bringing them simple, easy to understand offers that they can convert through MANTL. Like, we think it's going to be pretty cool.
That sounds amazing. Yeah. And it's funny. I know that, yeah, as I guess tech enterprises, companies, they're amassing all this data, and you might as well leverage it, put it to use, you know, hopefully, yeah, just make people's lives easier, you know, make smart decisions using it. So that sounds really cool. Well, David, I must say that, you know, you've had some great insight. It seems like, you know, obviously MANTL offers an incredible product. It seems like you're already working with like quite a few financial institutions. Is there any sort of, you know, plug or things that you want to drop to the audience that you feel like would be helpful?
Yeah, no, I mean, hopefully all of this was helpful. I've constantly been a believer of always be teaching and thinking about ways we can grow as an industry. So hopefully these were helpful tips. And we definitely think what we've done is differentiated. If you want to hear more, like, we'd always be glad to chat.
Awesome. We'll definitely drop some links in the description. And I must say, as a compliment to the things that we look at, you know, designing and developing websites, having a product like MANTL that makes that, you know, process that sits on top of their banking system so much easier, so much more streamlined, is really just a compliment to all the things that, you know, we can do. So thinking about UX, thinking about your customer, making things easy. So yeah, definitely.
100%.
I really appreciate you being here. This was awesome. Thank you so much for the chat, and definitely, you know, yeah. Hopefully we can do this again soon.
All right, thanks, Brent. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. This has been another episode of Mix and Matchbox. I'm your host, Brent Feldman, and we will be back soon with more content. Please like and subscribe. Thanks.